Okay, so we divided it into central nervous system, brain and spinal cord, and then peripheral nervous system, which is everything outside of that. The hard thing is it's all connected, right? The central nervous system basically interprets the data and sends back information to the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system has all the sensory receptors, and so it's going to send the information to the brain for processing, and then it's going to react when the brain tells it to do something. Okay, so then it's further broken into, I'm going to map this out again. Okay, the peripheral nervous system is subdivided into the motor function and into sensory. I'm pretty sure I have this correct. Okay. Motor division again is, it's going to, this is the action part. So this is the side that's going to get information from the central nervous system. This is the gather information side to send to the central nervous system. All right, so that's, the peripheral nervous system has those two sides to it. Now, I really hope I don't have this backwards for you, but you'll get the general idea. You have the somatic side of this. You know what? I'm going to flip this just because I have more room to work with here. You have the somatic side. And this is all the voluntary things. So, technically you have, so anytime you want your biceps to contract, okay, that would be part of the somatic division. Okay, and there's also somatomotor, which would be part of the actual, that'd be the action. Okay, I should look at your book again to make sure I have this in the correct order. And then you have the autonomic stuff. What does autonomic sound like? Automatic, yeah. Things you don't have to think about. Things you don't have to think about. This is the one that is further subdivided into sympathetic. I'm just getting right away. Sympathetic and what?
Parasympathetic.
Very good. Parasympathetic. And we went through this the other day. The reason this is so important for today's thing is because drugs interact with one or the other of these two subdivisions. It's going to affect the autonomic nervous system that we don't have to think about in some way. It's either going to stimulate sympathetic or it's going to depress and slow down parasympathetic, depending on the class or type of drug that you're talking about. I mean, and drugs are anything that, well, we're going to get into that. Okay, but yeah, go ahead.
On the notes that you had on campus,
yep.
It says under the somatic portion, it says sensory nerves and motor nerves.
Oh, okay, I got you. So I did do this wrong. I have these flipped, this level flipped, right?
No.
I don't?
I don't know. I don't know. There's just more, there's like information under the somatic.
Okay. I think what happened is I have these two things flipped. I think these two probably I should tuck under here. And then sensory and motor could go here.
Yeah, I think that's what happened.
Okay.
It says two parts, and then it says that the two parts are somatic.
Autonomic. Okay. So I flipped those. And that's why I thought something wasn't right. But either way, if you just, we're really focusing on the autonomic side of things, with the sympathetic and parasympathetic division.
So sensory and motor aren't the two parts.
Correct. Yeah. And honestly, what I should do is share with you. I have a flow chart that I made that I can share with you so you get the actual proper layout. So I'll do that. Okay, so come back to sympathetic and parasympathetic. Let's try to remember what each one of those does. Okay, sympathetic, remember fight or flight. Fight or flight. So Noah, what is one thing that happens with fight or flight?
Heart rate increases.
Heart rate increases. Absolutely. You are preparing to run or battle, and you need oxygen ASAP. Okay. Melissa, you got another one?
I don't know.
Yeah, I bet you do.
Do blood vessels contract?
They don't constrict, they go the other way.
What you call
Dilate.
That
Yes. Blood vessels dilate. A big reason for that, blood vessels dilate. A big reason for that is because your heart rate's already cranked up. You've increased the blood volume going through those at that point. If you constrict, your blood pressure is going to skyrocket, and you run the risk of an aneurysm where one of those blood vessels bursts. So what it does then, it does the opposite of that. Because pressure is already going to increase with the volume increase, we have to open those up so that we can kind of lower that back down. Now, I'm not saying that doesn't happen, because remember, when people get excited, sometimes they have a stroke, right? And it could very likely be because the blood vessels don't dilate quickly enough or enough in general when their heart rate starts to crank up and the blood pressure goes through the roof and poof, pop, there it goes.
When the heart rate goes up and the blood pressure goes up?
Yep. Unless your body does its job. Right? Because remember on your last test, the two ways that you can increase blood pressure, one is increased volume. You're doing that when your heart rate increases. Okay, the other would be vasoconstriction.
Because you're pumping more blood.
Right. Yep. So when one goes up, the other one has to let more through. Okay. All right. What's that?
Aspiration.
Respiration is going to do what?
Blow up.
Yeah. Respiration is going up. Same reason. We need oxygen right now. Respirations increase. Pupils
They dilate.
dilate. They get bigger. Fight or flight. I'm going to see whatever happens here. I'm gonna make sure I see any movement because I'm out to protect myself. Okay. So pupils dilate. What's going to happen to digestion?
Increases.
Decreases. Not going to waste time absorbing nutrients when I really need the blood in the muscles. Okay. Quickly, parasympathetic. This is the vegetative state. So the exact opposite is going to occur. Heart rate decreases. Okay. Well, if volume is going to decrease, that would cause blood pressure to plummet. So to combat that, what are your blood vessels going to do?
Constrict.
Constrict and increase that pressure up a little bit into a safer range. You've ever gotten up too fast? That's the problem. Okay? Because you're laying down or whatnot, and all of a sudden that blood pressure decreases because all that blood drops. Your blood volume decreases just ever so slightly, just temporarily. But your blood vessels haven't had a chance to react to that. And wham, you don't feel so great for a second. Blood vessels. Respirations.
Increases.
Okay, yeah, rest, decrease. Pupils. Constrict. Smaller. And digestion
Increases.
goes up, you bet. We can now focus on digesting or absorbing nutrients into the blood as opposed to sending it all to the muscles.
I have an off-topic question.
Okay.
So when you sleep, what happens to your pupils? Because they're not going to be totally constricted because that uses muscle to do that. Is it like a middle ground?
I would venture to say that they're, in a way, they're probably increasing and decreasing, constricting and dilating, because of all of the processes going on in your body. You think about, you have that dream where you're falling. Of course, you never hit, right? But you stimulate the sympathetic division. My bet is your pupils probably dilated some.
Or
Now,
even just like whatever you're thinking about.
right. Yeah. So yeah, they're probably going to be somewhat in between. However, most of the time they're probably going to be relatively small, because remember, they really are reacting to the amount of light that's available, and so they most likely spend most of their time pretty well dilated, because there's no light. Okay. Now I'm going to get rid of this ugly person. Up them over here. Yeah. Okay. So now that we've reviewed the sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions, we're going to talk about the drugs in particular. So a drug is basically anything that gets some sort of physical or psychological change in the body. Okay. So a psychoactive drug is going to be one that targets or changes something in the brain, causes some sort of reaction in the brain. Yeah, that bottom one is an important one, because more and more often now, these drugs are man-made. They're made in a lab. They typically simulate something that would be of natural means, but they may react stronger, weaker, or slightly different than something that would be natural. I think of like all the different synthetic marijuanas, and oh man, there's a lot of new synthetic opioid drugs for painkillers, and so sometimes they're way more potent than the original, which is scary, because those are already pretty potent. I can tell you that on your test, I probably won't put a lot of this stuff on there. I think this is a lot of everyday kinds of knowledge, things that you might run into in life. We just had a fire and EMS meeting last night we toured the school. Some of you guys saw us. And then one of the deputies put on a short little thing on things you might run into in the field, as far as somebody that might be on drugs, or they're carrying drugs in their vehicle when you come up on a vehicle accident. It's scary. I mean, some of these things that people are bringing through Nebraska, because we're so close to I-80, is just insane. And they're so toxic. Like some painkillers like fentanyl, typically fentanyl is a patch that's slow release. Well, now there's synthetic fentanyl that's in powder form. Well, a pound of that stuff can kill 1 million people. And if it gets airborne and in an accident, and lucky us go up and try to help somebody, and that's airborne, you've now been contaminated, and you can have all these different effects. So it's something that you can apply in your everyday life that you might run into, or unfortunately, you might have someone that you are close to that's involved in it. Okay, so here are the different groups that we kind of bust things into. Depressants. Depressants are definitely going to activate the parasympathetic division. Okay, they're going to slow things down. They include alcohol is a huge, probably the most common. Okay, which is always funny because when you're already depressed, you take another depressant. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And everybody's like, oh, woe's me, and then they go to alcohol. It does happen. Barbiturates are sedatives and tranquilizers. Ketamine would be considered one of these. I mean, it's a pretty common one. I used ketamine a lot when I was in the veterinary field stuff. So, what it does is causes drowsiness, depression. That sounds fun. Brain or nerve damage, coma, and respiratory failure. Okay, so that's the risk. The psychoactive effects is it decreases activity of the central nervous system. It's going to be parasympathetic. Now think about it. If you take too much, and whatever too much happens to be for that individual, as soon as you take it, you're already stimulating this division. If you overstimulate this division, it shuts it down. It just totally erase that. Okay? But if it's going to slow down respiration rate, and this is kind of crazy, but I mean, if you're around someone that drinks frequently, you can see this slowly start to happen. Now, yes, there are people when they drink alcohol, they get wild and crazy. That only happens for a while. Eventually, the other stuff starts to take over, and you can almost hear them breathing, like they're the very deep, shallow breaths. Okay, eventually they may pass out, and this is where people die. From alcohol poisoning, their respiration will actually cease. They'll stop. Another common issue with this is when they pass out, remember vomiting is a reflex that's controlled by the medulla oblongata, just like heart rate and respiration. Heart rate's also going to decrease. It may stop. That's a problem with sedatives. If you have too much of a sedative, it'll actually stop your heart. But the vomiting part of it is people then aspirate after they throw up because they're laying on their back and they die that way. So,
How do antidepressants work then?
antidepressants
Yeah.
probably
Fall in that category.
probably are going to start targeting sympathetic division.
I don't know, because when I had my concussion, they put me on an antidepressant because they thought maybe it would help. But with the headaches and whatnot, but it kind of made me like a whole different person. I was like crazy emotions. I got off of it right away. It was not good.
So all of those tend to simulate some natural chemical in the brain, some natural hormone of some sort that turns on and off different glands and all that stuff. So when you hear the term chemical imbalance, it's a real thing, because somebody may be low in a specific hormone and it affects them completely because it gets the thalamus going weird, and because you got all emotions, moods, hunger, thirst, all that stuff. It's the same thing where if you're on a specific drug for treatment of something, you may have no appetite, or you may increase your appetite and you can't stop eating. So that can commonly happen. The trick is always to try to balance it.
Right.
So, okay, stimulants. Stimulants obviously are going to do what?
Make you have a lot of energy.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I mean, it could be. It's definitely going to go stimulate the sympathetic division. Okay. This includes cocaine, which we'll spend a little bit more time on. Crack, nicotine. Think about somebody that smokes. Okay. That's a common thing. They kind of get edgy when they don't have it. Right. And then amphetamines like meth. So, people that on meth can go 2-3 days without sleeping. They won't sleep.
Oh my God.
Yeah. They also don't eat, and they don't take care of themselves. Typically, when people have nasty teeth after being on meth, it isn't necessarily the drug itself. It's the fact that they don't take care of themselves. There are other physiological issues too. So this is increased activity of the central nervous system. Typically, with this, you get aggressive behavior, paranoia, cardiac arrest, and high blood pressure, brain damage, which makes sense. I mean, typically when you're on an adrenaline high, it only lasts a short period of time. But when you're on something like this and you constantly have that epinephrine being released, that adrenaline, that's hard on the system. And so you can actually have heart attacks and stuff. Inhalants, nitrous oxide, which is laughing gas. They give you that maybe if you go have your wisdom teeth removed or something like that. Ether, that's you would see it in movies when people like, kidnap somebody and put it in their mouth.
Sounded familiar.
It's a starting fluid for like diesel engines. Paint thinner, glue, cleaning fluid, aerosols. This all sounds like a great time. Basically, what you're doing when you do this is you suffocate your brain because you're inhaling all of these different things that don't have oxygen in them. And so you get this sense of euphoria because your brain is going, hey, I could use some oxygen right now, and I'm not getting it. And so all of a sudden it starts acting wacky and you get this weird euphoric sense. The problem is you're killing brain cells when you do that. Plus, you're getting into your body a lot of nasty chemicals that can do some major damage. So, but that's the main reason people do it is because they get that high, like disorientation, confusion, and memory loss. Okay, obviously the issue here is brain damage because you're not getting oxygen. Kidney and liver damage because of the toxins that you are pulling in, because the kidney and liver have to filter all that crap out, and then respiratory failure. Hallucinogens, this is acid, ecstasy, your mushrooms, things like that. Okay, these are things that affect the central nervous system that may cause you to see things that aren't really there. Obviously, this is going to cause depression, paranoia, and aggressive behavior. I would probably be very paranoid too if I was seeing things that really weren't there, like dragons chasing me, and things like that. So, this is out there still. Obviously, ecstasy is a big thing. I don't know that acid is what it was back in the 60s, 70s. There's probably newer stuff.
I just know that from first.
That's right. Yeah. THC, this is the active ingredient in marijuana. It's psychoactive. What it does is it impairs judgment, and then it also decreases short-term memory loss, or causes short-term memory loss.
So how can it be used for medical things? Then is that just for like
Numbness. It helps to decrease pain temporarily. Yeah. Biggest thing here, just like when you inhale anything that's not supposed to be in your lungs, is lung damage, and then loss of motivation, which I know a lot of people that are fans of this that really don't need help losing motivation. Narcotics. This is the huge increasing one, unfortunately, for us to deal with these days. Heroin is the #1 killer in the U.S. as far as drugs go right now. It's relatively cheap, and unfortunately, this is one that you only have to try one time and you're addicted. Like most of these things, you like tobacco, for instance. You smoke tobacco, you got nicotine in there. Hello. And you aren't addicted right away. It takes time to get that hook. Heroin is so nasty that you try it one time. It can be anybody. You may think somebody is way above that, and they try it once and they're addicted to it. The problem is to get the same high from it, you have to increase the dose. And it doesn't take very long, and you reach the lethal dose. So it's very common. You think of all the singers and actors and actresses that have recently, in the last few years, died from heroin. They still got the needle in their arm. That's how quick acting it is. Morphine. So morphine is a much lesser version of heroin. I think heroin is a derivative of morphine. So when they make morphine, heroin is like the enriched version of it. Codeine. That's why if you take cough medicine with codeine, you may test positive for opiates. So you have to be careful of that. If you are in a job where maybe you get drug tested every so often, you have to be careful.
So it's not, because that's not really so much in.
It can be,
small amounts.
yeah, in small amounts. Opium is probably the leading money maker for the Taliban because there's opium fields that they have in Afghanistan, which are important because they are used for making some of these different medications that are important in medical treatment, but obviously it's sold for drug purposes. Feeling of well-being, sedation, impaired sensory perception, and impaired reflexes. Okay, these things are totally parasympathetic. Okay, people get addicted to painkillers because of their effects on the brain, and you literally do need more in order to get the same amount. Vicodin. I'm trying to think of all the different painkillers that are opioid. People that go in for surgeries and get on these things. If you have a natural tendency to be addicted to anything, you run a high risk of getting addicted to painkillers like this. You have to be careful and get off of them as soon as you can.
Isn't addiction kind of genetic?
Can be. Yeah.
It's definitely an
Yeah.
not so much like my close family, but I have a lot of relatives that are struggling.
Yeah. Okay. Now, some terminology differences here. So the difference between a dependence and an addiction, they're intertwined. So don't think that they're not similar. But dependence is in order to function normally, you have to have the drug. Okay? You have to have the drug. Addiction is you can't live without the drug. Your body now needs it. Okay? And so you lose control of the ability to not take it. And so that's a big difference.
So like if you say you have a caffeine addiction, it's a caffeine dependence, then actually.
Most likely.
Can you be addicted to caffeine?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
actually.
Caffeine's a drug.
So like you
Yeah.
could actually get to the point where you die if you did not have it.
Not necessarily. Can you say no for a long period of time? Or you literally have.
Yeah.
You can't not say no. You have to have it. Okay. Dependence is probably more common with caffeine because you might start getting headaches and stuff like that, and you just can't function normally because you haven't had it. And so you take it and you're back to normal again.
So does addiction lead to dependence then because your body needs it all the time?
Yes, and I would say probably vice versa as well. Because you continue to use it to be functional, and at some point then you may get that addiction where you can't stop. This is fun. This is just nicotine.
When a person is addicted to a drug, the body may have both a chemical and a psychological need for the drug. By the very nature of addiction, once a person is addicted, it is very difficult to stop. Physiologically, drugs may bind to the cells of the brainstem and make receptors less sensitive to the body's natural chemicals. Pathways in the central nervous system may also be changed due to the drug. These changes and the force of habit reinforce the psychological need for a particular drug. Irritability, anxiety, and confusion may result when the drug is denied. If the body doesn't receive the drug, the body may react with symptoms of nausea, vomiting, and pain.
Okay. Every day. Tolerance. Okay, this is a bad one because you're gonna know people that this is like a bragging point. Well, they have such a high tolerance. Well, I can drink a 30-pack and you can't even tell. Good for you. The problem is, just because you don't get the response anymore, the damage is still being done. Like, you've increased the amount of the drug, alcohol, And the effects, the negative effects that it has on the liver are still being done at that point. You just aren't getting the psychological effects of that at that time. So tolerance typically is not a good thing. Tolerance is usually a bad thing. It means probably you're doing it way too much, and you need more in order to get that psychological effect. And every time you do more, the more damage is being done at that time.
During normal transmission of a nerve impulse, neurotransmitter molecules enclosed in vesicles will move toward the synapse. Some of the neurotransmitters will bind to receptors on the next neuron, and the impulse will move to the next neuron.
This is what I was trying to draw.
Any remaining neurotransmitters will be taken back up by reuptake receptors on the releasing neuron surface. When a drug enters the synapse, they bind to the reuptake receptors. The neurotransmitters will remain in the synapse. Depending on the drug, this may give rise to a feeling of euphoria or some other altered state.
And it keeps that.
But over the course of drug use, the receptors on the postsynaptic neuron will decrease in numbers to compensate for the state of extended excitement. When the drug enters the synapse again, there is less of an effect. As a result, the drug user must use more and more to achieve the same result. At some point, a toxic level of the drug will be used and the person will die.
That's how cocaine works, which is there. That time I didn't push it, so I don't know what I did. Okay, withdrawal. If you take the drug away and the brain has kind of rewired itself to become dependent on that drug, you will go through withdrawal symptoms, which can cause severe pain, shaking, vomiting. Some of these things can be very nasty. It's very, very difficult to go through these things by yourself. Sometimes it lasts a day. Sometimes it lasts a week. You can even think about somebody that's just trying to quit smoking. I mean, they get the shakes, and they just don't feel good. They're extremely irritable. It's a tough thing to go through.
So how did your body start to reprocess the old habits
Where it doesn't need it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, it will eventually. Now, you may have done enough damage already, depending on the drug you've taken, that maybe you've accelerated liver failure or something like that, and it doesn't always recover. Depends on the amount of damage that you've already done. Will they come out of withdrawal and feel better than they do when they're in it? Yes, they will. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to just run through this. It's kind of similar to what you just saw as far as how cocaine works. Dopamine is another one of those neurotransmitters. I think I talked about acetylcholine before, which is the one that stimulates muscle contraction. Dopamine would be another one. So cocaine goes in and binds to reuptake receptors. So that means dopamine levels are way high in that synapse. And so the postsynaptic nerve keeps getting stimulated and told to fire because those neurotransmitters aren't going away. And so that's what gives you that a little bit of, oh, this isn't normal. Hey, this kind of feels good kind of thing. Once you reach a certain point, that postsynaptic nerve, that second nerve, is going to reduce the number of receptors to try to stop itself from firing all the time. And when that happens, now the cocaine isn't going to have the same amount of effect.
At a normal ME synapse, neurotransmitter molecules are removed by reuptake receptors. Cocaine and certain other drugs bind at reuptake receptors, blocking them. Neurotransmitter molecules remain in the synaptic cleft. The overstimulated postsynaptic neuron reduces its number of receptors over time to normalize firing. When the drug is removed, the number of neurotransmitter molecules drops to normal. This normal transmitter level is too low to stimulate the altered postsynaptic neuron normally.
Okay, good. Got that time of it. Okay, so I want to run through this one because this is the most common one you're going to run into. Alcohol is a depressant, and so it's going to stimulate parasympathetic. The thing you have to realize about drugs is a lot of times based on body weight. And the reason for that is the larger the person you are, the more blood volume you have. And so the percentage, the concentration levels are different for each person. So when they measure that and they make you blow into it, or they do actual blood tests, they'll measure it blood alcohol concentration. How much of the blood actually contains alcohol or is alcohol? Okay, so this is kind of interesting. Per person, there's nothing that breaks down alcohol faster. There's a lot of things that you may have heard as far as things to sober you up more quickly, like the cup of coffee or whatever. But in reality, to get rid of the alcohol, it takes time. The reason for that is your body depends on two enzymes, proteins, naturally made in the liver, that break down alcohol. The first one, there's plenty of. And alcohol is not the problem. So alcohol initially gets broken down into another product by the first enzyme. It's the intermediate product made by that enzyme that is the toxic part of alcohol. And so this is what's going to do the liver damage. If you drink just a little bit, you have enough of the second enzyme called CP450. I do not expect you to remember that. I'm not sure why I remember it. But CP450 will break down the intermediate product into a non-harmful water and something else. I don't remember what it is. Okay? You have enough of that to break down a little bit of alcohol in your liver right away. And you're not going to do any damage. You're not going to get any effects from it. You don't have enough CP450 to deal with large quantities. And so the alcohol sits in this intermediate stage, the toxic stage, for long periods of time. And no matter what you do, you don't make more CP450, and it takes time to break down the alcohol, so it's gone. This is where blood alcohol concentration comes in.
After only one drink, a normal person will begin to feel the effects of alcohol. The 100-pound person will have a blood alcohol level of 0.04. That is 1/2 of the legal intoxication level. After 2 drinks, the 200-pound person has reached the level of 0.04. The 100-pound person is considered intoxicated. After 3 drinks, the 100-pound person in red is severely intoxicated. The 160-pound person is reaching the legal intoxication level at 0.07. After 4 drinks, the 200-pound person is legally drunk.
0.08 is.
After 5 drinks, the 100 and 160-pound persons are severely intoxicated.
Okay, so me being a little slightly over 200 pounds, in that first hour, I can have 4 drinks, and I'd be right at the legal limit. The problem is, you only break down about 1 drink an hour. So this is not, what people get confused on this is, okay, I can have 4 drinks an hour. It's not. If I have 4 drinks in that first hour, I can have 1 drink in the next hour and still maintain my 0.08. That's the hard part. And somebody that's smaller than me it's gonna take a lot less than that.
What's the legal blood alcohol concentration level for driving?
0.08.
Is it?
Yeah.
I know it changed.
Yeah, it was 1.0 and now they changed it to 0.0. But it's been quite a few years, but yeah, they changed it. Now for you guys, it's 0.02 because it's 0 tolerance. They give you a small leeway because of cough medicine or something like that that might contain alcohol, but you're supposed to put below zeros. Your minors, right?
Wait, so they used to give us leeway, now they don't?
No, they still
Oh,
do.
okay.
You're supposed to below zeros. But they'll probably, you know, if you're just above and you don't have the alcohol on you, they probably are going to give you a little bit of leeway. But 0.02 is that cutoff.
Yeah.
If you have more than that, it's not cost
It's
medicine.
pretty hard to have less than 0.02 unless it's.
Right. Yeah. So that I just wanted to go through that with you guys because it's a misconception.
And then also, are there, this is a kind of weird question, but are there any health benefits to alcohol? Because I know like fermented drinks have health benefits, but is the drug itself?
Alcohol, it's a natural blood thinner. So they, you know, there's been studies that say like a glass of wine or a drink, one a night can have some heart benefits, but any more than that is not. There's nothing really beneficial.
A glass of wine.
Yes.
It seems like a lot.
A glass?
Yeah.
Okay, it's
Every
what is it?
single night.
5 ounces. It's not. Okay, it's not your big glass. Okay, tomorrow. You guys will have census terms and the worksheet that goes with this. I will post it today while you guys are gone tomorrow. I'm gone tomorrow. So that way you have things to work with. Do what?
Is it NHS meeting?
Yes, during IMP, yes.
So here?
Yes. No, no. You guys, I think you guys are here. It's for the, other, that's for Monday. Monday, you guys have a meeting because we'll walk through.
Right, okay, I think it was because Savannah said that there was a meeting because we were thinking of it.
Yeah, this one's just,
Hi, guys. Hello.
How's it going, Ashley? Oh, man, I just realized I'm still recording.